After the investigations announced by the FIA at the end of the race, the first verdicts from the stewards have arrived. Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton have been disqualified from the Chinese GP for 2 different infractions. The Monegasque's car was found to be underweight, while the 7-time Formula One World Champion's car was excluded because the measurement of the skid under the floor showed wear beyond the limits allowed by the regulations. Charles Leclerc had finished the race in 5th place ahead of his Maranello teammate after losing pace in the second half of the race due to front wing damage that cost him 30 points. However, following the steward's investigation, that 5th place is now lost, as a technical regulation violation mandates disqualification as the only possible penalty. The FIA stated in its report that car number 16 had been weighed by the FIA technical delegate, with both scales displaying the same result of 799 kilograms after the usual fuel discharge and replacement of the damaged front wing. It was also noted that the calibration of both scales had been confirmed and verified by Ferrari. The report further explained that during the hearing, the FIA's measurements were not contested, as they were considered accurate and all required procedures had been correctly followed. Ferrari acknowledged that there were no mitigating circumstances and confirmed that it had been a genuine mistake on their part. Lewis Hamilton's disqualification stemmed from a different issue. According to technical regulations, the skid was required to measure at least 9 millimeters in thickness during post-race checks. However, the stewards determined that all 3 measurements taken indicated a thickness ranging between 8.6 and 8.5 millimeters. The FIA document confirming Lewis Hamilton's disqualification stated that the skid on his car had been measured at 8.6 millimeters on the left side, 8.6 millimeters along the car's center line, and 8.5 millimeters on the right side, all below the minimum thickness of 9 millimeters specified in Article 3.5.9 of the Technical Regulations. Additionally, it was noted that during the hearing, the team representative confirmed the accuracy of the measurement and compliance with all required procedures. The team also admitted that there were no mitigating circumstances and acknowledged that the error had been entirely their own. That disqualification that Lewis Hamilton suffered from 2nd place when with Mercedes back at Austin in 2023 also came, if you remember, on a sprint weekend too, like this one. On such sprint weekends, team setup time is less than normal owing to the fact there is only one practice session to dial their cars in and to test setups out on track outside of a competitive session. Have Ferrari been caught out here by that lack of preparation time? We'll wait to find out what Ferrari have to say afterwards. While they have certainly had better days, see Saturday and the sprint as one example, and far higher points hauls, the double exclusion has cost Ferrari 18 points in the Constructors' Championship today. That moves them down a place too, behind Williams to 5th, and leaves them 61 points behind reigning champions McLaren already after just 2 rounds of the new campaign. The lost points also mean Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc are not yet into double figures for the season. Lando Norris leads the drivers' standings on 44 points. Regardless of the outcome in the Chinese Grand Prix, a thorough analysis of how events unfolded for Ferrari on track is far more important. So let's take a first detailed look at how things went for Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton on track in the 2nd round of the 2025 Formula One Championship after a surprising win in the sprint race, but also a rather poor performance in the qualifying session on Saturday. Ferrari decided to adjust the setup ahead of the Shanghai race. Team principal Frederic Vasseur did not comment on it, believing it was the right move to avoid controversy. Such a decision is not made lightly, of course, as it has clear repercussions on qualifying. This is also why the 2 SF25 cars were slower than on Friday, having to settle for a 3rd row. The new track surface at the 5.451 km Shanghai International Circuit provided a significantly higher level of grip. The drivers are enthusiastic about it on a fast lap, as there is more room to push harder. Unfortunately, there is a downside: the ease with which graining develops and the high degradation of the tires. Therefore, the Italian side's technicians and engineers decided not to take risks, keeping in mind that points are awarded on Sunday. The reasons for this choice are clear: avoid excessive tire wear and be able to show the best pace during the Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc mentioned this yesterday, explaining how difficult it was to race in traffic, with the turbulence from other cars reducing downforce. This is why he said that today he was not so sure he would be able to match the pace Lewis Hamilton showed in the victorious Saturday sprint race. The British driver completed 100 kilometers in free air, as it's called, without the aerodynamic disturbance that, besides affecting vertical downforce, significantly impacts tire performance. It is always the same dilemma. Start at the front and manage tires with a less optimal setup, or start at the back, better prepared for the tires. In the end, which is the correct move? Unfortunately, there is no standard answer to the previous question, as the variables in this game of parts are many. It depends on the context, we can only say. This is why we could only hope Ferrari had made the right calculations, confident that the strategy concerning the setup adjustment was the least risky move. In hindsight, we can add one more thing. There was no race pace to fight at the front, regardless. The Maranello team split their strategy in today's race. Lewis Hamilton on 2 stops, Charles Leclerc only 1. A move that, in fact, favored the Monegasque in the final result. Despite the front wing damage from a collision with his Maranello teammate, which cost him several points of downforce, around 30, the Monegasque driver crossed the finish line ahead of the 7-time Formula One world champion. The SF25 is a good car, but at this moment, it is the third force in the championship. It should be emphasized that it is third because Red Bull is ahead only due to Max Verstappen's immense talent, not because the RB21 is better than the Ferrari SF25. They are roughly equal right now. One might think that the adjustment to the ride height slowed down the Ferrari. However, in general, all teams slightly raise the car. Well, probably that slight change on the Ferrari affects it more than the other top cars. The working window of the Maranello car is rather narrow, at least at this stage of the 2025 Formula One racing season. It will undoubtedly widen as the engineers are working on it, and with time and updates, everything can certainly change. There is a lot of work to be done, though, and Lewis Hamilton's final team radio, communicating with his race engineer Riccardo Adami, perfectly captures the current competitive context. The British driver notes how the result was not as expected regarding the moves made yesterday. The same when he speaks of the push still needed to give the Italian car a superior pace, with a high fuel load on board. McLaren is ahead, but so is Mercedes. A little too much if the goal is what has been loudly declared, to become world champions. There is time to fix things because the Formula One season has just started. Undoubtedly, the learning curve of the Maranello team regarding the car will help a lot. However, precise corrections are urgently needed and should be backed by performance on the track, because this Ferrari SF25 is not living up to expectations, and especially the goals set for the 2025 Formula One Championship. 1 week of rest, then Japan. Let's see what happens at the Suzuka circuit.